your hand if you've ever been in school anywhere. You might be in school now, some of you probably. Raise your hand if you've ever had the experience where your teacher is telling you things and you're thinking to yourself, when am I ever going to use this information? Yeah, hopefully you're not feeling that way right now. It just dawned on me that might be your experience today. So this is by design, and it's a system of education that has been formulated very specifically to cultivate students into a product that does something. What that something is has changed a bunch over time. But for me, I like to think about it as a tree. So this symbol's been around for a really long time too. And so I created a tree as a way of visualizing the things that I'm going to talk to you guys about. So tree of knowledge, if you will, or tree of life, kind of the same thing in a lot of ways. But the pieces that make up that tree are students. So for this tree, the pieces are these little brains that I made. And it's a tessellating pattern. So that means that it stacks on itself and it can go infinitely in any direction. But it doesn't, because it's confined to this tree, right? Again, an idea that somebody had of what we need to know or how we need to operate. All right. So education, largely, especially the lower levels of education in America, they are what Paulo Freire calls a banking system, which means the students are depositories of information. So teachers come in and they fill students with stuff. So that can be dates, that can be facts about history, that can be scientific notation, the atomic weight of plutonium. So all of those things that the experience we just talked about were probably happening for you in those kinds of moments. Like they're filling you with this stuff that you just feel isn't going to be very valuable to you. Okay. And what that does, again, historically, and there's lots of data and smarter people than me that have done the research on this, it disenfranchises the learner, it oppresses the learner, and keeps them from becoming like who they are. And for me, that is what education is about. It's an emancipatory act. It's an act of humanity. Okay, so teachers, we make decisions every day to live our lives in the best interest of everybody else. So that act is very purposeful to develop the world that we think needs to be developed. All right. And everybody has an agenda. Everybody has like a way that they think that should happen. But the more we're able to allow people to figure that out on their own, in my opinion, the more that is a success. So for me, that's the real measure of education. Okay, so the system as it is, especially in the last 40 years, in the mid 80s, there was this government initiative to decide how well we compete against other nations in academic stuff. And they published this paper called A Nation at Risk. And that paper said, we don't, and we're not very good compared to these other countries in math and science and all of these things. And so they used that to create curriculum and a roadmap for education that's got us to where we are now. All right, so that idea of competition doesn't really make a lot of sense. Why are we competing? It's not really the problem that, that we can't be competitive. The problem really is that we're competing in the first place. And I think it was Neil deGrasse Tyson who said, the only person you should ever compare yourself to is yourself, because everything else is apples to oranges. And that statement makes a lot of sense to me. But so we've gone down this road of competition and depositing information into our students and forming them into a product a piece that fits into the puzzle, right? So sometimes they fit real nicely as planned. That was great. Okay. Sometimes they don't. There's a million ways that we could arrange this so that it looks more aesthetically appealing. Um, but ultimately, this becomes this image of whatever this tree represents. And that's different regionally. Different states have different standards, but they're all pretty close. We've done a pretty good job of trying to make that universal across the board, which most people think is not a great idea. I'm one of those people. Um, and we have this tree, right? But I don't want to burst any bubbles. This is not a tree. It was once, like it's made of wood. Actually, a lot of different trees because it's made of a bunch of different types of wood. But it's just a representation of that. Okay, so that's the life that people are living. They're living a representation of a life. All right. For me, it's much more effective if we create our own tree. Okay, it's much more dynamic. All of the leaves have value because they're bringing us things and nourishing our lives. The brain is much bigger and also more dynamic because it's developed in our interests in the things that we are interested in. So one of the problems with this banking system is that it gives students the answers to all the questions. That's really what a lot of teachers do, is they go out and they teach students the answer to a question. A lot of times that is aligned with an exam of some type. I would say probably the vast majority of the times, unfortunately. And so that becomes problematic because we're no longer able to creatively problem solve. And so knowing the answers to questions is important, but sometimes knowing why you asked the question is more important than knowing the answer. And we are taking that opportunity away from our students by just telling them what the answer is. Okay, so this whole thing is like a weird visual representation of that for me. I currently am a teacher and have been for quite a while. And one of the things that I do in my classroom is present opportunities for students to fail. And that process, which I've cultivated again over nearly 20 years of being an educator, is a difficult one to relinquish for most educators because we're all told that if a student is failing, then we've done something wrong. But if they aren't, then they're not really learning. And there's a lot of quotes from a lot of really smart people, again, who say similar things, Einstein being one of them. If you've never failed at anything, you've never tried. So a very important part of my classroom's pedagogy or learning dynamics is that you're going to fail. All right, I have a big sign that's right above my desk that says, our woodshop projects are made of wood and failures. So it's very clear to everyone that that's a part of the process. And it's probably the most important part for me. Okay, I'm trying to activate their own understanding of how the learning process works for them. Okay, I'm not going to tell them how I do it, which, trust me, they ask me to do all the time. I need help, which usually means do this for me, which all of my students know is just not going to happen in my classroom. So we have opportunities to fail. Okay, I think of it as a safe place to fail. When I talk to parents, that's how I justify having a sign that says that their kids are going to fail in my classroom. This is a safe place to do that. When they go out into other subjects, they're not going to be afforded that opportunity. And without it, they won't be a whole learner. Okay? And then it eliminates a lot of things that students struggle with when it comes to trying things. Okay, and if you're not open to trying, again, it's going to be really hard to learn. So we have a lot of thrown away scrap wood projects in my classroom. And then at some point, we actually usually turn those into something else, which is pretty fun too. But failure is really, really important. So I'm going to tell you kind of a story about one of the lessons that is currently taking place in my classroom. So I've been at the school that I'm at now for 4 years. This is the fourth year, so almost 4 years. And it starts with woodshop in fourth grade, and then they go to fifth grade woodshop, and then middle school. They kind of didn't really do that, but when I got the job, I was like, we should definitely do that. Like middle school kids, I remember woodshop in middle school. Did anybody take woodshop in middle school? The lucky few. Yeah. Unfortunately, there's only like 10% of schools in the nation that still have a woodworking program, which is just really sad to me. But so we went fourth and fifth grade woodshop, slightly more advanced. I think of fourth grade as learning to crawl, fifth grade as learning to walk, and then middle school, sixth grade, seventh grade, learning to run. And then by eighth grade, they're teaching me how to fly. So that's where we're at with these kids now. So it's the first year, 4 years in, where I have an advanced class. And I named it that on purpose because there's expectations there. So when they come in, they say, ooh, I'm advanced. I know what I'm doing. Like, I don't need to go through the safety demos. Wrong. We're still going to do all the safety demos, much to their chagrin. But I actually really like the safety demos. I get to scare kids a little bit. Yeah, that's true. That is why I like it. All right. So this advanced class, all these kids came in. I know them really well now. I've known them for like almost half of their lives, really, after 4 years, because they're 10, 11, 12 years old. And I know what they can do because I've taught them those things or watched them figure them out. And I came up with an idea. So I'm going to ask them to do some things that I know at least half of them just can't do. All right. So that idea was to create a puzzle piece. So all of the 11 kids in that class, yes, I have a class that's only 11 students. It's amazing. I know how lucky I am. Everybody got one of these, and it's a CNC cut puzzle piece, kind of the negative of it. Now they need to give me the reverse of this. So their job is to take a piece of wood and make a piece that fits in there as perfectly as they possibly can. And I do all kinds of things to throw roadblocks into that. Like, oh, you messed that corner up. Let's start over. Or I don't know if you're going to be able to get that now that you did that cut there. So none of them have done it on the first try. We're 5 weeks in. They come to my class twice a week, so that's 10 classes. I have one student who's completed it, and almost everybody else has done it at least 7 or 8 times. So that process of failure is like my bread and butter. I'm watching each one of them approach it in a completely different way, which is amazing, and fail in completely different ways, which is also amazing. I have one student who every day he comes in and he's kept all of the pieces that he did that were mistakes, and he lays them all out and he looks at what he needs to combine to make it work. Like, I would never think to do that. It amazes me, like the way that they creatively problem solve the thing when you give them the opportunity to do that. Okay. And for me, again, failure is that vehicle. So we have this thing, you're creating this piece. There you go. So it should fit in there in a way that you can't see too much light through the creases. It's got to have a little bit of room, but it should be able to hold itself in. And, that's a really, really hard thing to do. Even for me, this is obviously mine. Even for me, that's a lot of work. Now think about a 12-year-old kid and the attention span of a 12-year-old kid. And then how much trust they have to have in me that this is valuable to them. Okay, so another thing that a lot of people don't if you're not a teacher or if you're not in education or if you're not around kids all the time, the thing that you don't really know is just how important it is to like build those relationships and trust. Um, and that's like their foundation for how they're going to approach the rest of the world. And for me, showing them that messing up and making mistakes can be like a really important, valuable part of your life, um, and from a person that they respect and trust, is kind of the most important thing that I can do. I feel like I wouldn't do it if I didn't. So that is just like an example of how we can use creative, imaginative practices in education to further the learning and enrich the lives of young people in ways that the banking system and giving them answers and not allowing them to ask questions just can never do. They tell you that you're supposed to start something like this with a quote, but I didn't do that. I'm going to end it with a quote. And also, the quote is going to be from me. So I know, yeah, I know. If you know me, it kind of makes sense, but also, whatever. I think it's a good one. It makes sense here. So, in my conception, failure, again, not a dirty word. Failure is your skills trying to catch your ambition. And that happens for all of us. If we don't allow creative spaces for kids to explore those things, they'll never develop those skills. Creativity isn't something you can teach. It's something you can just allow. So we can't teach this thing. We can just not squish it. Right? So it's my hope that all of the teachers out there and parents out there just won't squish it. That's it. Thank you.